It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Welcome in to Take Command. I'm Craig Hoffman. That is Logan Paulsen. And today, Logan, we're doing it. We're drafting.
I'm excited for it. You know, like, it's weird. I was thinking about it last night. I was like, man, this is so weird because I watch all these other people's mock drafts and I think, man, that's a terrible pick. And now we will be making terrible picks.
Yeah. So that is that's the goal, is to make as many. We just want to be the talk of the internet for how bad our mock draft is. No, we're gonna do our best to. Logan and I basically gonna act as coach and GM. We've decided that we don't know which one is which, but that's fine. We're part of a front office, a part of a football unit together, drafting here. And we are excited to do it, and then we're excited to talk about kind of the process later on this week with Mike Renner. Pro Football Focus is going to join us on the second pod this week, so looking forward to that. But for today, it's us. We're drafting. Also, if you're a podcast listener, Apple, Spotify, etc., this is going to be a good one to watch on YouTube because we do have Pro Football Focus's mock draft simulator up, so you'll be able to follow along. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you see that already. So, Logan, let's get right in. Carolina Panthers have the first pick on the clock. We'll probably roll through some of these picks a little faster than others. Obviously, We'll stop down at 16 and see how the board went and what we want to do for the Commanders.
Why would we do that?
We're just an equal opportunity podcast where all teams are treated the same. We don't spend any other time and weren't hired to do one particular team's bidding. We don't do their bidding. We talk about them. Anyway, the point is, number one pick, Carolina Panthers on the clock. Of course, they made the trade up with the Bears. And this pretty much comes down to which quarterback do you like the best in this draft?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's Bryce Young. That's the one I personally like the best. But the more you talk to people, the more the size thing is an issue, right? And then when you look at C.J. Stroud, I think C.J. Stroud's an excellent football player. And you get to watch a lot of C.J. Stroud in this evaluation process because you got DeJuan Jones, you got Paris Johnson, you got Whippler, you got the kid, the receiver, I can't remember his name at the moment, Smith and Jigba, right? Yeah. You got all four of those guys you got to watch. You get to watch a lot of C.J. Stroud kind of tangentially. And one of the things is that offense in Ohio State is absolutely fantastically sick. He's throwing from a lot of clean pockets, and statistically, when you look at quarterbacks in the NFL that struggle early, they throw from a lot of clean pockets because NFL pockets aren't super clean, right? And so I don't know. I feel like Bryce Young's the pick here. I did hear an interesting take this morning when I was driving around after my training, and they were like, with the number one overall pick, you want to take the player with the highest ceiling. And, you and I both know who that is at this point from a quarterback standpoint, and that's Anthony Richardson. So I probably wouldn't do that because they don't have somebody to kind of like man the ship. But yeah, I think it's one of those three guys. Noticeably, Will Levis is absent in our evaluation, but I'd go Bryce Young. Like, that's my guy. Like, I think he's fantastic. I think he's got a Mahomes kind of feel for the game. He is small, but I think his upside's good. I think he's a good pro. I think he works hard. Everything I've heard about him is plus, except for the size, and I think I'm okay with that.
I agree with you. Now we have the decision to make kind of fundamentally of, are we acting as how we think these, are we doing a predictive mock, or are we doing what we would do? I kind of think we should do what we would do.
Right.
I think that's more interesting, and kind of how we pitch this is that, like, we're the football decision-making unit, and we are in agreement here. Bryce Young is the top prospect based off what he's done on tape. Then you look at the measurables and you're like, oh, well, that could be concerning. But as he played in the SEC, the best conference in America, not the NFL, but the closest thing that you have to it in college football. He was just fine. My biggest question would be, as someone, if I'm a coach coming to you as a GM or a scout who's watched more tape than me, obviously by the time the draft would come around, you'd hope that's pretty even, especially if you have the number one overall pick. But it's like, how did he do against the LSUs? How did he do against the team, Georgia, obviously? Like, was the size all of a sudden an issue specifically against Georgia compared to him getting away with it with lesser SEC opponents?
Well, I think that's the thing with Bryce Young, is he was just so consistent. I mean, even in the games he lost, dude is straight dealing. Like, loses to Tennessee because the kicker misses a field goal. Like, he is going toe-to-toe, point for point with Hendon Hooker in that offense. He's making plays. He's leading 2-minute drives. He's doing everything you want to do. LSU, same thing. Georgia, the championship game last year, was one of the best games or the conference championship game. I forget because they played twice, like in a matter of 2 weeks. But one
Right.
of those games was like the best college football game I've ever seen from a college quarterback. Just throw for throw, making plays. Now we had an excellent stable of wide receivers. All those factors were huge, but that's the thing about him is that the moment never feels too big for him. He just can see the field at a really high level. And I do think Carolina is probably going to go CJ Stroud just from what I've heard and been reading. But for us in this situation, like it's almost a no-brainer, right? It feels that way. It's like Bryce Young feels like the guy you want. And again, you mentioned the level of competition. Like he's throwing from all kind of different pockets, throw angles. The talent on that Alabama offense is kind of down as a whole, I would say, outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, who we might talk about later. But I think that's got to be the pick for me.
All right, let's submit it to Commissioner Nick, our producer, and there we go. The first overall pick, Bryce Young to Carolina. This becomes, I think, then a much shorter discussion for number 2 at Houston. DeMeco Ryans taking over at the helm. They need a franchise quarterback. I think this one's going to be pretty easy. We scroll down, we take C.J. Stroud. Is he clearly the number 2?
I think so. And the only thing I could see happening is like I think they really like Bryce Young. And maybe they're a little out on C.J. Stroud, and they take Will Anderson here. Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, even Tyree Wilson. But it seems very unlikely that they don't draft a quarterback. I'm just giving you like it is possible that does happen.
Yeah.
I don't think it's very likely.
Any chance that they trade up with Carolina and swap picks if they really, really like
That's a really
Young and they're
interesting.
like, oh crap, Carolina.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think really interesting notion anyway, that they would switch. But I do think one of the reasons they feel comfortable staying is because I think they believe Carolina is going to draft CJ Stroud. So why am I going to trade up if your number 1 quarterback is different? And then this is something good to note, just kind of big picture is this is where your stuff at the combine, your pro day stuff becomes really important because your scouts start talking to each other. And let's say one of your scouts or your security officers gets information that CJ Stroud is the number 1 guy on their board. I think you say, well, we don't need to trade up. And that's where this kind of time of year, which from a national media standpoint is probably a little bit overhyped, but for teams is super important because they're doing some serious digging and trying to get access to these boards and stuff. So.
Right. If you're Carolina though on the day of the draft and you like both guys, you certainly call Houston. You're like, hey, we're gonna take Young, but if you want to trade up, we'll listen. But that's where these things get fun. And Carolina, there was talk around when they made the trade with the Bears that like, yes, they really like some of these quarterbacks, but they haven't decided yet, but they really just want control of the draft, and they certainly have that. All right, number 3, Arizona. This in some ways, because you figure one way or another, the quarterbacks are going to go 1-2 in Young Stroud or Stroud Young. So in some ways, this is where the draft starts, and you talk about trade action potentially. This certainly could be a place where if a team really likes Anthony Richardson, a team really likes Will Levis, do they come up, trade with Arizona, who obviously is set at quarterback with Kyler Murray coming off the injury, but they just signed him to that big, long deal. They're not going quarterback. So coach, GM, scout, half the front office, Logan Paulson, what are we doing here at 3 with Jonathan Gannon's Arizona Cardinals?
But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you want to trade this pick if you can. I as much as I like Will Anderson, I think if you can get some – because like the problem with the Arizona Cardinals is there's a lot – their defensive line's in shambles. Their secondary's getting older. They don't have any linebackers. All the linebackers they've taken in the first round have kind of fallen on their face, right? You need offensive line help to a certain extent. You need some skill position players because you're probably going to try and trade Hopkins, right? Like there's just not a lot there. So the only way I know how to fix that is to trade this pick. And I think it's good that Anthony Richardson's balling. It's just who is going to be the team that's going to trade up with you. That becomes the question. If no one trades, I think it's a pretty obvious, like Will Anderson. It used to be Jalen Carter. I think Jalen Carter is a much more dynamic football player than Will Anderson. I think his ceiling's much higher, but obviously he's had the legal stuff. So I think that's going to push him down boards pretty significantly. So if it's not a trade, it's Will Anderson, I think. I guess I've also seen Tyree Wilson in this spot.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason you would switch them is because you believe Tyree Wilson has a higher ceiling. And he's kind of your Trayvon Walker of this year's draft. Long, rangy, big athlete. The production doesn't quite match the athleticism yet. But maybe if you're betting on upside, you take him here. I'd go Will Anderson. I just think it's a safer, more consistent football player. A guy that he's not going to be bad. He might not be the best football player of all time, but he's definitely not going to be bad. And I think you just need to hit at the third pick with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and with Gannon coming from Philly, like he's a guy that obviously had that stable of defensive ends. Nick, real quick though, can you click on the trade tab for us? Let's see what offers are potentially there. Detroit, a team that's certainly come up.
I like that. If Detroit, I think Detroit is a team that would trade up and probably should trade up. And what I would do if I was Detroit, I'd trade up. They have 2 picks in the first round. You can keep the second one, right? Exchange picks, maybe give up your second, draft Anthony Richardson here, and then pick kind of another, kind of maybe not blue chip, but a kind of a depth rotational player at, I think they're picking at 18 or something like that.
18.
So, that's kind of something I would definitely consider this. What are they giving up here? They're giving up.
So if let's go ahead and propose a trade here. So let's go 6, and then 48, and then 152 maybe.
Let's see what happens.
And then that for 3. This trade will likely be accepted. That's probably too much. So let's go back off 152 if it's that green. So 6 and 48 for 3.
I think that's. Yeah, I mean, I don't like giving up my second pick. If I was doing it, I'd probably say give me 55. But if you believe he's that dude, then go for it. You know what I mean? And I think this is relatively reasonable. Like you're really just giving up a second for a guy you think could be kind of generational. So yeah, I'm on board with that. Let's do it.
Unfortunately, Logan, we don't have your PFF logged in here. And we didn't log in before we started, so we can't actually do this trade. That's a poor job out of us. If we want to pause and log in and edit around this, we can, or we can just keep going with no trades.
I think we just go no trades, but I think like, this is good for the fan, for people to see. Yeah. Like this is something I think is very, very viable. In terms of a team because in terms of like when you're looking at prospects, you say where would they fit really well. Detroit is where I'm like, if Anthony Richardson is at 6, Detroit is jumping for joy because I think you have golf. You can do the Aaron Rodgers. You can kind of let him sit for a little bit and let Anthony Richardson develop in this offense with an offensive coordinator who's probably one of the best in football at the moment, definitely top 5. So I love this for them. I don't know if they'll do this because, this Campbell, you got to interview the quarterback, all that kind of stuff. But Detroit is definitely a spot for Anthony Richardson. I think is very, very good. Yeah.
I will say if I'm Detroit, I don't know. They like golf, and golf's been pretty good for them. So,
but he got 2 years left on his deal, something like that. And I think if Anthony Richardson sits for 2, I think that's exactly what you want. He's in your system. He's in your terminology. It's a red shirt, 6 overall.
Do you really want to take the 3rd pick on a guy? Like when you're competing for the playoffs, though, 3rd pick on a guy that is going to sit for a couple years, that's rich for me.
So for me, what I would say is that like this dude is Josh Allen from a talent standpoint. He's Josh Allen plus from a talent standpoint. But from the processing, accuracy, all those kind of fundamental things, he started 1 year as a quarterback in college football. If he's Josh Allen, like just hypothetically speaking, then hell yeah, right? Like because you are planning on, if you're Detroit, never picking this high ever again, right? Because you're going to be good. You're on the verge of being a good football team who won't pick before 20 for the next 5 years. So if this is your opportunity to get that quarterback, a guy who has that upside, who can sit, who can do the Bryce, the Love thing up in Green Bay, Jordan Aaron Rodgers thing, whoever it is, like I think that would be a pretty savvy move. Now, is the fit right? Is their evaluation high in him? I think those are all questions that need to be acknowledged. But yeah, man, I think that I would be fine with that with this pick if that's the direction they chose to go.
All right. So back to draft a player we go. And with all that, we go Will Anderson because we forgot to sign in and unlock trades. All right, number 4. Then you have Indianapolis. And for all the talk we just had about Anthony Richardson, this is the guy that has been mocked here most often, and it makes a ton of sense. Shane Steichen coming over from Philly as the new head coach, of course, was their offensive coordinator, super mobile quarterback in Jalen Hurts, a guy they did a great job of using the run game and the quarterback run game to allow Hurts to continue to polish himself as a passer over these last couple of years. Like Jalen's incredible. But here's the thing, the biggest difference, and I think the oversimplification that happens when comparing Richardson and Hurts is Jalen, yes, he needed some development as a passer coming out of a college system into the pros, as most guys do. But he was incredibly accurate. Like his accuracy was not an issue in the way that Richardson's is. So to just say like, oh, well, Jalen's mobile and can run and, could run for 100 yards in any game, and so can Richardson, so they just plug and play the same way, is a complete botching of what these two kids were as prospects coming out. Even though Richardson's seen as the much better prospect because he's potentially a top 5 pick and Jalen was a second rounder, as passers, Jalen was miles and miles better than Richardson was from a polish standpoint. Again, that doesn't mean that Richardson can't get there, and that many of kind of the same strategies in terms of utilizing the run game and specifically leveraging the quarterback's running ability to simplify the offense can't be used, but it's not as simple as like plug and play, same results.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. The what you're banking on when I hear people talk about him to Indianapolis is that he's going to rush for 1,000 yards. He's going to be Justin Fields. And I don't know if I love that. Obviously, he's a big physical son of a gun who's, the freakiest quarterback we've ever seen at the NFL Combine. But if I need a guy to come in and start day one, Anthony Richardson is probably not my guy. And again, I'm a little bit old school in that regard. I'm a little bit conservative. We've talked about that before on this show. And I'd probably go Will Levis if I'm the Colts. And even though I don't like Will Levis as much, I just think he's more ready to play some football. Now, if you believe Shane Steichen can get that run game going and they're going to look like the Baltimore Ravens did for a couple of years with Lamar, maybe, right? But obviously it's going to be very specific schematically. And we just talked about Anthony Richardson's ceiling, but I think this is the first pick where you're like, I don't really love it. And again, it's not you don't love the players. It's like, what is the fit for the team? And I know I might be in the minority here. And if you think I'm wrong, please leave a comment. But I think banking on Anthony Richardson being 1,000-yard rusher is a little bit risky given his anticipation concerns, his accuracy concerns. Like, can he get better? Absolutely. But it's a longer road than it was for Hurts, for example. So if I'm advising you as the coach and the GM and I'm the scout here, I'd say I'd probably go Will Levis just because of the situation. But again, there's going to be another person in the room banging on the table really hard for Anthony Richardson and maybe even someone banging for Jalen Carter, right? It just depends on what you think the right fit is, quite frankly.
Yeah. So I'll be the guy banging on the table for Anthony Richardson. Okay. If I'm Shane Steichen, I go, look, man, you just gave me a how many year deal? Like, you're going to fire me if we're not good this year? Like, right. Let's go. Like the Colts are not a good football team. They don't have a lot going for them offensively. If Jonathan Taylor gets back and their O-line gets back, then maybe all of a sudden you're looking at a team that can win some games. But they've got not a whole lot at wide receiver, not a whole lot at tight end. Their defense has some playmakers on it. Zaire Franklin had a good year. Obviously Shaquille Leonard, if he's healthy, is one of the best in football. But they just traded away Gilmore, like, and somewhat of an admission that, like, hey, we're trying to restock the deck here. So if you're okay with not really, and I'm going to say not caring if you win or lose this year, but winning this year not being a priority, I'd go Richardson. And by the way, my best path to win this year is a dynamic running game with Jonathan Taylor and Quentin Nelson and all those dudes up front. And Anthony Richardson's going to help that day one. It's the one area where he helps you tremendously day one because, as we've seen time and time again with great running quarterbacks, whether it be Josh Allen's ability to run, the threat of it affects the Bills' run game in a positive way because you have to account for him. Obviously, then you go to the next level of Lamar or Justin Fields, and you see how much damage those run games can do, not only those individual players, but the team as a whole. So I would take Richardson and just try to be this behemoth like new school, old school running football team and see if we can win some games that way. And if we can't, okay, we'll just draft high again next year and continue to stack the deck with talent and hope that some reps for Anthony Richardson helps turn him into the quarterback that we want him to be.
Absolutely. And I also think it's important to acknowledge this is a team that I think would be in the Lamar Jackson sweepstakes pretty dramatically. So they like, if you're Baltimore and you trade up for Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, I think it's a similar conversation. But I feel more comfortable Anthony Richardson going to a team like Baltimore because, they've done it already with a guy like Lamar. And Lamar's a much better passer, much more accurate, much more efficient. But, they've
and by
got
the
a
way,
roadmap.
like what Lamar ran at Louisville was much more pro style as well.
Correct.
Like people kind of underrate that with Lamar. Like Bobby Petrino, weird dude, but runs a pro styled offense. And so Lamar had some experience doing some of that stuff. Still needed the adjustment period, obviously, but he's a pretty good passer. What makes him Lamar Jackson MVP is his ability to be a 1,000-yard rusher, but like pretty good passer. I do wonder, in the same way that I've wondered a lot about the potential for Baltimore to trade Lamar here because of the fan base dynamics.
Yeah.
And like it's right down the road. Obviously the Baltimore, Indianapolis Colts, leaving Baltimore dynamic, like that's a weird one. And like people can say, oh, it doesn't matter. Like it does, especially to the principal owners involved here, specifically with Jim Irsay. So, does Baltimore want to stick it to Indy in some way? Probably. So that's something to consider. But in our no trades, kind of talking through it, etc., I think Richardson's the pick here.
And you did a really nice job explaining that. So I think, I'd go, based on your philosophy, if that's how they feel. My
bang on the table worked. All right, Nick, we're going with Anthony Richardson. Let's hit draft.
Yeah.
All right, number 5, Seattle.
Jalen Carter, not even a question.
Okay.
I think they are a team that like has a good, strong culture. They've draft people with, I don't say questionable character concerns, but they've taken
some risks over the years.
Carroll seems to breed an environment that can insulate those guys. He's the best non-quarterback. He's the best football player in this draft. When I watch the film, like he is really good. I have some concerns about his work ethic. Might be a little bit lazy, but if you believe your culture can tolerate it, I think that's where you go. The other one that could be on the board is Tyree Wilson here. But yeah, man, like, I don't know. I feel like it just is too good to pass up for a team that really needs good interior defensive linemen. And if you think you can tolerate it, I don't know. What do you think?
Done. Jalen Carter.
Okay.
There's the pick. The pick is in. That was easy. All right. Detroit,
man. It's got to be Devin Witherspoon. I think he's the one of the most fun players to watch in this draft. I think from a cornerback standpoint, and I know they've taken a lot of first round corners, so it'd be here or Tyree Wilson. I think, but I think he's an outstanding football player. He's got that dog. I feel like he culturally fits with Dan Campbell at a high level. I think this is where you go.
Yeah, I agree. My issue with Tyree Wilson here is what the Commanders have done to themselves, where they took Aiden Hutchinson last year, and in 4 years, like, do you necessarily do a lot of long-term 4 or 5 year planning? No, but you don't not do it either. And do you want to pay 2 edge guys in a couple of years in the same way that the Commanders doubled down on that strategy, going D tackle, edge. And I would say no. So let's go Devin Witherspoon and keep things moving to one of the more interesting picks in the draft at number 7 with the Raiders.
Yeah. So this is tough, man. I would probably go best offensive lineman available, and in my opinion, that's Peter Skoronski from Northwestern. I guess you could go Christian Gonzalez here too, if you really wanted to. Tyree Wilson, like, defensive line is a huge need for them. And I know people say, they have Chandler Jones. They have, his name escapes me at the moment. Crosby, who's probably one of the best edges in football. But I think Chandler Jones did not play very well last year. And if you want a guy with some high upside, Tyree Wilson, Skoronski, Tyree Wilson seems like the high upside play here at 7. And also, I think if you need offensive line help, which wasn't terrible last year for them, but I could definitely see them going Peter Skoronski here because he's a very good football player.
So what about Levis potentially here? They just signed Jimmy, but Jimmy's an older guy. He's had, or not older, but he's on the plus side of 30. He has had the injury issues. Obviously, I think they're bringing him in to be the starter and think they can win a bunch of games with him. McDaniel had him in New England. Jimmy's pretty much won everywhere he's been. It makes sense, but he's not, is he a bridge guy eventually? But like, are you still, you haven't even gotten on the bridge yet. Like, I don't think I would go quarterback if I was them, considering I just brought in Jimmy. If it goes sideways this year, you're going to have another high pick and you can go into this loaded quarterback class next year and take one. Levis is staring at you at 7. I think you think about it.
Yeah.
But, and also, obviously, if someone wants to trade up, like that's possible. But I tend to agree with you that going some other direction is probably the right play. I'd say let's go Skoronski because that's what we would do, right? That's
Well, I think
that's how we're
and
doing
I
it.
I was just about to say, like, I just was reviewing my notes while you were talking, and I have a slightly better grade on Skoronski because I think he's more consistent, right? And that's an important thing to kind of acknowledge about Tyree Wilson is that, like, while being a physical freak, he's very raw still, and so you are kind of projecting him a little bit. And if you're Oakland and if I'm the GM, I want, like, I look at what Washington did last year, and they just took good, consistent football players that are good, consistent starting players. And I know people want to hit the ball out of the park, with the pick 7 in the draft, but I want someone who's going to hit, and he can
Yeah.
play tackle, he can play guard, he can play center. Like, he can fill that out wherever you need him to do. And I just feel like it's the most likely pick at this spot to hit, I guess is what I'd say.
All right, Peter Skoronski, pick is in. Let's do it. Which gets us to number 8, and the Atlanta Falcons. Everyone is mocking Christian Gonzalez here. Are we just going to follow that, or is there someone else that you would consider based off the board? It's pretty funny. They've got PFF needs quarterback. That doesn't seem to be what they actually think, though. They're going to roll with Desmond Ridder. Took a fairly high pick on him last year, which is what I would do too. I would not go Levis here especially for what they do.
Right. I would probably go. Tyree Wilson would be the guy that I would think about here.
Yeah.
Like that, because I know they need defensive line help. I know they have, Grady Jarrett. They have the kid that they drafted out of Penn State who's got some pass rush upside, but they need help along the defensive line. Now, could they go corner here? Absolutely. But I do think from a philosophical standpoint, just looking at what they do offensively, I think they value trench play. And, here's a big physical athletic dude that is going to be more impactful down to down. And again, you talk about consistency in terms of production. I know he took Devin Witherspoon at 6, but corners tend to be very challenging to project. It's scheme dependent, it's philosophy dependent, it's a whole bunch of different stuff. And Tyree Wilson, just put him at edge and say, hey man, have fun, go get the quarterback, go find the ball. And those guys tend to translate a little bit better.
Wilson's like kind of a speed guy too, right? Like really quick, explosive athlete.
He's just a big old son of a gun, quite honestly, man. Like, he's just huge. He's 6'6". I think he's 275, 280. And he's just a big, strong, not overly twitchy, but fast for his size type of guy. Like, when you're watching him, like, the best way I can explain him is, like, you've been to a high school football game before and you're watching and there's a guy going D1 and he just jumps out because he's a little bit bigger, he's a little bit stronger, he's a little bit faster than everybody. That's kind of how Tyree Wilson is at the college level, right?
So here's why I'm asking, because they've got that turf down in Atlanta, and I think back to like the old Indianapolis Colts teams that were built to like pass rush indoors with Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis, right? Would you go a kid like on some speed, like the kid from Georgia, potentially?
I see. So what I would say, I'm
totally forgetting.
I'm really glad
Smith,
you brought
maybe?
this. I'm really glad you brought this up. This is a great point. So this defensive edge rushing class is very deep. Like, you can get a really good player, I'm sure, in the second round if you're Atlanta. You can get, Felix Ndike, the kid from Kansas State. You can get the kid from Iowa State, Will McDonald IV. You can get, there's some really kind of more in the mold of what you're describing, kind of twitched up, super pass rushy type guys who have very, very high upside. And I would say, if you're doing a 2-round mock, you probably go Christian Gonzalez here. Just having said that, just because I think at 8, all right, when they're picking in the second round, there will be a very good pass rusher there. The kid from Northwestern is another guy. What's his name? And it's got like a lot of consonants and vowels and stuff, but a freaky kind of guy as well.
Yeah, Edebore.
There we go. Yeah, so that guy will probably be there. You know what I'm saying? So with that kind of pass rush depth, there's not a Christian Gonzalez is a first tier corner in my opinion. So based on that logic, why not go Christian Gonzalez here?
All right, which puts me now in the position, I guess, to pick between the two. Let's go Gonzalez.
Yeah, because if you're doing a 2-round mock.
Well, I mean, yeah, we're not going to go through all, we're not going to do a 7-round mock today, but in theory, like, we're doing the first of what eventually would be the full draft. So
right.
We should let that infiltrate our strategy.
Toughest one for me, quite honestly.
Yeah, so now we're at pick 9 after Gonzalez goes 8. Chicago Bears. This is obviously Carolina's original pick. They need everything. You got Levis on the board, Tyree Wilson on the board, and then you start to get some of the receivers are starting to crop up as, best available on PFF's list. I know those are a little high from where you have them.
Yeah.
To me,
like Paris Johnson Jr. would be interesting.
Yeah, tackle's interesting for them, but they need D-line help, and Wilson's probably the best player on the board. And on some level, I think you just don't overthink it.
That's
you
a
just
good
take
point.
Tyree Wilson.
It's a good point. Yeah, I agree with that. I buy that. Yeah, 100%.
All right, let's just do that and keep it moving. Tyree Wilson.
Like you're right. Don't overthink it. Right, he's the best player there. It doesn't need to be. If he's there, they're probably going to pick him. Right. So.
Right. All right, Eagles at 10. They are the opposite of the Bears. They don't technically need anything. They're awesome. But, I mean, it's funny because if Wilson falls to them, like, they're obviously taking him because they just take edge dudes in perpetuity and then always have great edge players.
Nick, could you scroll down a little bit on this list to the right here?
So we see our best available here.
So this is where I think it's interesting because I think Kalijah Cansey is really interesting, and I think Lucas Van Ness is super interesting here. I think for that.
Cansey's the kid out of Pittsburgh who everyone is like, oh, he's Aaron Donald light because he's went to Pittsburgh. He's undersized and he's incredibly quick. But like, just so people understand his athletic profile, if you do blind resumes of him, like his combine numbers and Josh Norman's combine numbers, you don't know who's who. Now, there's a reason Josh was a 6th-round pick, and part of that was the measurables, and obviously Josh was able to overcome them for a long time to be one of the best corners in the game. But, like, that's the kind of athlete we're talking about with Cansey. Whether he can translate it anywhere close to what Donald has done seems unlikely because Donald's the best ever at his position. But super intriguing. And then Van Ness, kind of this big, stout edge guy that we've talked about before on the pod for sure, is a potential option at 16 for Washington.
Yeah, so I think Hargrave's Hargrave departs, goes to San Francisco from Philadelphia. He was kind of their pass rushing 3 technique. You have Jordan Davis, who's going to be in there on 1st and 2nd down. So they do, and you mentioned they have this scaffolding to support a very specific solution for Kalijah Cansey. You know what I mean? Like they have, like much like when you need to draft a running back, like it's not the right fit for everybody. It's Kalijah Cansey's not the right fit for everybody.
Right.
But I do think Philadelphia, in their defensive line approach, this guy could be the right fit for them. So, if they pass on him, let's say they go a different direction, let's say they go Lucas Van Ness, Edibare is very similar in terms of athletic profile to him and also can play 3 technique and will be available when they pick at 30. So it's also kind of like, is there a player on the board right now who you feel better about? And just looking through this list, I mean, like the other player I think they would think about drafting is an offensive lineman, but the top 2 guys, I guess Paris Johnson's available, but he plays tackle. I guess you could draft him to play guard, right? They just lost their right guard in free agency.
Right.
And then he's kind of waiting in the wings for Lane Johnson to retire to play right tackle. I could see that. And they always are kind of planning a year or 2 out. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm them, I'd probably want to trade out, if I'm being honest. The problem is like who's trading up and for what? It's been interesting to watch the offensive line kind of stock fluctuate throughout this process where it used to be like there's no way all 3 of the top tackles are going to be available for Washington at 16, and now it's like maybe 2 of them will be available.
Yeah.
I would probably like Philly has the luxury of doing whatever they want, and if they think Cansey is a guy that can be super impactful for them, I think they just pull the trigger and they don't, I'm not going to say they don't care about the value because as I said, they would probably ideally like to trade back somewhere in the, the 15, 18 range, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But I say for what we're doing, let's go Cansey.
Yeah. Okay.
Because, if him and Jordan Davis are your 1 and 3 technique for years to come, like,
you feel pretty good. And they are very pro defensive line. So Lucas Van Ness would be an interesting one here as well. I could see them going that way because they like those big pocket pushing guys. I just think Cansey has more juice, so it's like it's a very specific thing, but Philly, they have the scaffolding to support it, so why not?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, Kalijah Cansey is the pick at 10. That's the one we're going to get crushed for on the internet. All right. Let's go to, so that's top 10 picks in the bag. We're going to have to speed up here. We'll speed through the second half once we get past Washington, but we'll keep, kind of talking about these top guys as we go. Everyone's mocking wide receivers to Tennessee at 11.
Oh, really?
It's rich, but I mean, based off this PFF board, we're looking at not so much, because right now, for those listening, the PFF board best available has Levis, Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver out of TCU, Jackson Smith and Jigba, the receiver out of Ohio State, Brian Branch, then Lucas Van Ness is the best available, Joey Porter Jr., the corner out of Penn State, best after that. So if that's the case, and all of a sudden these wide receivers are maybe sitting a little higher on people's boards than we anticipated, going wide receiver, the biggest need that Tennessee has, doesn't seem so off-putting here. So I would say, Logan, pick your favorite wide receiver, or they just obviously moved on from Taylor Lewan. Do you go Paris Johnson and go left tackle?
I mean, I know they signed the kid from Philly, the backup left tackle for them.
Yes.
Dillard, is that his name?
Yeah, Andre Dillard.
And I don't know, man. I wouldn't have a lot of confidence in him, and I think I like Paris Johnson as an upside play. Is he raw? Yes. Is there some developmental work there? Yes. But he does have the position flexibility in that group to play guard and tackle. It's a safer pick than these receivers. Like, if you're going to go receiver, you probably go Jackson Smith and Jigba, because he's the most polished, but he also only played in the slot at Ohio State. He only played 2 games last year because of a hamstring. Quentin Johnston's a physical freak, but doesn't catch the football super consistently. Now, is that quarterback play, whatever it is? I don't know. I just think you want to kind of bet on the offensive line. Like, they're just safer picks. That's why they get pushed up. Will Levis here would also be interesting. How do you feel about
I was
guy?
about to ask you that, because it depending on what you think of what Malik Willis did last year in practice and such, like, do you really feel good about that moving forward? Because he was basically unplayable. I mean, they had a playoff game. They started Joshua Dobbs, right? That was a playoff game, or it was just a Week 18 game?
2 games, yeah.
Yeah, like, that's concerning. Did
absolutely.
you just miss? Do you not have the infrastructure to support him? Did he need the year? Like, whatever it may be, unless you think that he's going to figure it out, I would just take Levis. But I don't think they're going to do that. I will infiltrate a little bit of what I think their thinking is here and pass on Levis. I would say let's go Paris Johnson here and just take the safest thing. And they're still trying to build that infrastructure probably around Derrick Henry, and kind of that's going to be, even when Derrick Henry ultimately moves on, right, do they kind of build that same style of football? So let's go Paris Johnson. Nick, pick is in. Paris Johnson, tackle at Ohio State. All right.
I'd probably go Quentin Johnson here for Houston is what I would do.
So yeah, let's just go ahead and kind of blaze through that one. Quentin Johnson, best wide receiver on the board, goes to Houston with their second pick. Jets, who presumably have Aaron Rodgers coming in, they could use some help, a couple spots on defense, linebacker specifically, and then O-line is the other big one. Like, so where would you go here if you're them, knowing that Paris Johnson's off the board, et cetera?
So I don't like any of the tackles available at 13. I think the next guy on my list, let me just check. It's Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. So obviously he's my next guy. He's above Broderick Jones for me. This seems a little high for him. I could see him taking him because tackles always get pushed up in the first round. And like the top 7 tackles are good football players, and they're going to just get pushed up because no one wants to miss, right? I think Nolan Smith would be interesting here for a defensive-minded head coach, guy always looking for pass rush upside, and Nolan Smith has excellent pass rush juice. Now, Lucas Van Ness is here. I don't know. I just think knowing Robert Saleh, knowing what he likes, do they go Joey Porter Jr. here? That would be another interesting one to play opposite of Sauce Gardner. Nolan Smith seems like the right kind of player for them. But they do need a tackle and they do need linebacker. I just don't think the tackle value is great here. So that's
this is a probable try to trade down. You also wonder, could they like trade down and go after another weapon for Rodgers? Could they do like a Dalton Kincaid situation, something like that? They obviously signed a bunch of receivers.
Smith and Jigba here, if you really like them.
They could. I mean, they did. They just obviously drafted Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State last year, and that's been fantastic for them. They just signed a bunch of, they signed Lazard. They signed a couple of these guys. Man, this is a tough one. Let's get crazy. Let's go Nolan Smith, the edge out of Georgia, which I don't think is like crazy. The dude ran a 4.39. Like,
and he's a beast now.
Him and Montez Sweat. Like that's the kind of athlete we're talking about.
His film is insane. Like the way he moves, the way he can rush the passer, the way he bends. Like he's got a little bit of like Vaughn Miller to his game.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the comp you're getting for him, like at
Yeah,
13,
take that at 13.
right? And he fits kind of your defensive philosophy of pass rush first, second, third. So I think that's a good fit.
All right, let's do it. Nolan Smith for the Jets. That leaves their division rival Patriots on the clock. Hilariously, New England, the PFF has quarterback as a need for them. Not huge Mac Jones fans. Seems unlikely that they'll actually go that route. But they do, like, to me, they do need some playmakers, right? Like they don't have.
Yeah,
I'm not forgetting anybody at wide receiver.
But they historically don't draft receivers well.
Yes.
Like in the first round. And I think if you're got a defensive head coach, Bill Belichick, I think Lucas Van Ness goes either here to Green Bay, the next pick. And I think just looking at this board right now, I think you probably go Lucas Van Ness.
So let me throw a wild card at you.
Yeah.
Is there anybody better at using like these kind of wild card pieces than Bill Belichick? And Brian Branch is sitting there.
Yeah.
As a safety corner something.
Yeah, I mean, I am not as high on Brian Branch. I think he's a good football player. I think his like lackluster combine has kind of got me a little bit spooked about him at the NFL level. Kind of like Kyle Hamilton. Like, everyone thought he was a top 5 pick last year, didn't run well. And I think you see, because he's going to have like a limited role, right? He can't play true post. He's got to kind of be that nickel box safety probably. Yeah, that feels like a very New England pick. Brian Branch, even though a lot of people are kind of moving him into that 20 to 35 range on their boards, like New England does not mess with that. They kind of march.
Alabama kid, obviously, the Belichick Saban connection.
100%. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Screw it, we're doing it. I'm pulling up Belichick. I don't give a bleep what everyone else says. Yeah. Brian Branch is the pick at 14.
Yeah.
Which then leaves Lucas Van Ness for Green Bay, the edge out of Iowa. Fits real well with what they want to do in rotation with Preston Smith, et cetera. And then now we're at 16, Logan, and the board has fallen in a terrible way for Washington in a draft that is not allowing trades.
Right. So I think ideally you want to trade back, right? But if I'm here, I'm ecstatic because I can pick Deonte Banks, and I think that's the pick here. I think a lot of people would say Joey Porter Jr. Okay. I have Deonte Banks a little bit ahead of him because I think he's a little bit more scheme agnostic, right? I think he can play a little bit more zone. I think he can play man. I think he's got kind of the plus athletic upside. I think he ran a 4.38 at the combine. He's got a 41-inch vertical. He's got an 11-foot broad jump, and he's never really out of phase. Now his ball skills get me a little bit worried, right? I don't think he has elite ball skills in tracking the football down the field, but he is in phase he's always in phase with the receiver. And even when he gets beat, he has the recovery speed to get there. Joey Porter Jr., on the other hand, I think is a little bit more of a project. Now he's a freak. I already made the Trayvon Walker comparison. Like that's kind of what you're looking at. He's got 34-inch arms playing corner. That's like tackle length. He looks like a freaking praying mantis out there. He's a man corner kind of exclusively, not a great tackler, but his upside is very, 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 very high. And so I think that's the only reason. Like if we're in a draft room and you're pounding the table for Joey Porter, the only thing that's going to sell me is you think he's got a higher upside. But in terms of being a better pro today, Deonte Banks is significantly better. So
yeah, and he's also got freakish athletic ability. Like those numbers you rolled off, 4.38, 41-inch vert, 11-foot broad. Like those are elite numbers. So it's not like from an athletic standpoint he doesn't have what it takes.
And he's not a small guy. He's 6'11 and a half, 6 foot, or no, 5'11 and a half, 6 foot.
He's actually an NBA player playing corner.
And he's like 195, 200 pounds. So he's a big guy for a corner with great movement skills. He's a little, and again, this is some of my bias, a little bit more physical as a tackler. And when I'm evaluating corners and it's hard to separate guys, that's usually the separating piece for me is, are they going to put their face in there? Because that means they love football. And he does that, talks a lot of smack. This is not an indictment of Joey Porter in any way. If you have to pick, that's where I'm going.
What about Levis?
I think if Levis falls to here, this is good for Washington because I think Tampa Bay might trade up with you. And I think if you can get back to 19 and pick up another second or third round pick, you're dancing for joy, right? I do think you consider Levis 100%, but I think Deonte Banks is the play here. Again, and they might have a really high grade on Will Levis. He might be their second quarterback. If that's the case, you take him. You just
right.
You just don't even think about it. You take him because that's you got to trust your evaluations. But from a need standpoint, from a player standpoint, I think you feel pretty good about Deonte Banks.
Yeah, no, I think that if this is the way the board falls, this is a 100% trade back situation because there's so many players that are kind of in the same bucket that you probably like, Banks, Porter Jr. potentially, Kincaid, like all these guys are going to be there and available for you at night, or some of these guys, I should say, are going to be there and available for you at 19. However, with the way we're doing this particular mock, pick is in, he a Terp, he's not going very far. Deonte Banks gets to keep playing in the state of Maryland. He's the pick for the Commanders at 16. All right, let's roll through like 30 seconds or less the rest of this first round.
I think now this is the most laziest mock of all time. I think you go Joey Porter Jr. here, or you go the kid from Tennessee. God, what's his name?
The tackle you're talking about?
Yeah, Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright. Even though Anton Harrison's like my number one guy, I think those are like very Tennessee type picks. Big physical right tackle, or Joey Porter Jr. long, good man corner, right? So you're the.
Let's go with the vanity play, the legacy play. Joey Porter, obviously legend for the Steelers. We'll go Joey Porter Jr. just for kicks. Lions at 18.
Who'd they pick at 6?
We picked Devin Witherspoon for them at 6. You take Levis then?
I would think about it for sure. It's that or Miles Murphy right here, I think. All
right.
Like, because Miles Murphy is kind of, I don't know, I'm not as high on Miles Murphy, but in terms of big physical defensive linemen and kind of establishing an identity, I don't think any of the offensive linemen, Anton Harrison might get you excited, but they have good tackles there. You're looking for a guard.
Right.
So Osiris Torrance is a little too high for me, in my opinion, in my evaluation on him. So I'd probably go best defensive end available. Or, nope, I wouldn't go Jasmine Smith here because they have Amon-Ra or whatever his name is.
Yeah, they have an Amon-Ra same round. However, they did trade what's his name to Minnesota last year, the tight end.
Oh yeah.
So, wow, I can't think of his name. He's so good. Kid out of Iowa.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is they need a tight end. Dalton
But I
Kincaid.
will say this. I'll say this. Dalton Kincaid is not Hawkinson. Thanks, Nick. Kincaid is not a Dan Campbell guy. He's not, because he doesn't block very well. So I think he's gonna. If they want one, they're going to be looking for a different type of guy. Like they're probably more in the Michael Mayer type sweepstakes for them, I think.
Okay. Do you want to do that here? Or you want to go Murphy? Your pick.
Murphy. Let's go Murphy.
All right. Miles Murphy is the pick at 18, which leaves Will Levis to go 19 to Tampa. That's a no-brainer, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Done. Seattle on the clock again at 20.
I think you go Jackson Smith and Jigba if he's here.
Okay.
Right? I mean, don't you? Like, he's the best receiver available. He's a slot player. They don't have a slot player there.
They've got Lockett. They've got Metcalf, but they could use a slot guy. Let's go Smith and Jigba there. 21 Miami forfeit, but then you get LA on the board. They were probably psyched to see Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, they're probably pissed
but now. Zay Flowers is real good. Kid out of Boston College.
Scroll down a little bit, Nick. Let me just.
And we could go that. We could go Jordan Addison if you want a receiver. Another interesting pick for them would be Bijan Robinson, the tailback out of Texas, because Austin Eckler, requested a trade. You wonder how many more years he's got. Those are all interesting. And then you got some of your other corners like your Emmanuel Forbes, et cetera, that could be interesting for them.
Yeah, I just was going to check my corner ranking real quick while we're talking. So continue talking. Let's see if there's anybody that. I guess it's a little high. Yeah, this is a tough spot for them. Honestly, I don't really like anybody here.
We forfeit the pick.
No, I mean it's just tough. I think this is kind of like where like Bijan could go here. You mentioned that, right? Like Bijan maybe here, right?
Let's do it. If we're making the pick, is that who you would go with? Like, hey, I can get a generational talent at running back for my very young quarterback.
Yeah,
I mean, you do still have Eckler, though. That's the thing. Is like Eckler's not gone yet. But I actually don't hate that because if I want Robinson to be there for a long time, like not giving him 300, 400 carries as a rookie is probably enticing.
And this is one of those things where it's like, like you're going to reach on an edge. You could reach on an edge because it's a deep edge class. You could reach on a tight end. I think Mayer here would be interesting. I just think Bijan Robinson's got the potential to be a more dynamic football player. And if he's sitting here at 21, like, you don't pass up on Hall of Fame blue chip players. Is it a little high for him? Yeah, but is he the best player on the board? Also, yeah. There's not a receiver here. There's not a corner here. There's not a linebacker here that I like. They could go O-line, I guess, at right tackle. And, this would be a Darnell Wright scenario, and maybe that's where you go here.
Who helps their running game more in the next 5 years? Darnell Wright or Bijan Robinson?
Darnell Wright, I would say.
Okay, then let's go Darnell Wright.
Okay.
Because, Kellen Moore coming from Dallas, like, obviously had Zeke and Tony Pollard. Like, that is a play-action heavy type of offense that you imagine they'll run. So, wow, Darnell Wright, 70th rank on PFF.
For Mike Renner, he's his 15th or 20th ranked player.
So, yeah.
And so this is the consensus board. So this is how everybody mocks. And I don't know, like, when you watch his film, like, he's a heck of a football player.
All right, let's go Darnell Wright, Nick.
You could also go Anton Harrison here. I like Anton Harrison a lot, but they have a left tackle. Anton Harrison's a left tackle, right? So I'd probably go best right tackle available or Bijan Robinson. So I don't know.
It's a conversation we're probably going to have a couple more times as well over the next
leave a
couple
comment
picks.
on that. Here we go.
All right, Baltimore at 22.
Zay Flowers.
Yeah, the best receiver on the board, unless you like Jordan Addison better, but I like Flowers a lot. He just seems to make plays
That's a good
all
question.
over the place.
Yeah, he just feels like a Baltimore guy, right?
Yeah, let's go Zay Flowers, receiver out of Boston College. All right, Minnesota. They also could use a wide receiver to kind of replace Adam Thielen. Then they obviously need help pretty much everywhere on defense.
I wouldn't mind Addison. I think Brian Breesy is a guy that I'm not overly high on. I think he's a guy that, everyone talks about him being the best recruit in the class a couple of years ago when he was coming out of high school. He's a good football player, obviously a good athlete, but the film doesn't quite support it the way you want. I think that's always something that gets you a little bit like, ugh. So I would probably go a different direction. I'd probably go Jordan Addison here.
Okay.
Because I think they need a guy to replace Adam Thielen.
Okay, let's do it. Let's go Jordan Addison. That gets us to Jacksonville, who needs some interior O-linemen. They could use another edge. Obviously, they did take Trayvon Walker last year. They could also use a DB on the back end.
Jeez, this is a tough spot. I mean, because like right now, I like Anton Harrison there. I think you protect your young quarterback. But again, he plays left tackle, and they still have their left tackle there. Their right tackle left in free agency. So Broderick Jones, again, I don't love Broderick Jones. I think I'm a little bit lower on him than a lot of people. They re-signed Evan Ingram, or else I'd say go Dalton Kincaid. I think you're looking for a weapon here, but I don't know if they've got anybody that makes you really excited. Gosh, this is.
I mean, I would consider Kincaid here if he's your best player on the board, and he's like kind of in that separate bucket, which is kind of where we're at right now. Is he the last player in that like tier 2, tier 3, depending on where you draw the line at the top? Ingram, they didn't re-sign him long term, did they? It's like,
I don't know.
Was it a 1-year deal, 2-year? I don't know. But like Peterson, he's had Zach Ertz and others at tight end when he was in Philadelphia. Like, this is a guy who does know how to operate with multiple weapons. And Kincaid will be a cheap weapon for a long time when some of these other guys are big money guys. I'd probably just lean Kincaid here and be like, let's just try to score 30 a game. I mean, obviously also prime trade down territory. Potentially trade out in the first round.
I think if you're looking for weapons, that's a good idea. And another thing would be like, is Kincaid your type of tight end? Do you want to get like a Meyer or
that's a good point too, because Ingram is I want to say glorified wide receiver, but he's definitely, the slider is more towards receiver than it is towards blocker by a lot.
Yeah, and Manhurst just left. He I forget where he went, but he left in free agency. He was kind of their big blocking guy, so. Maybe based on type, you go Michael Mayer, excuse me. But I think Kincaid's just better in the passing game. Like it gets a lot of comps to Zach Ertz. I'd probably do that actually.
All right, let's go Kincaid then. Giants on the board at 25. They could obviously use some receiver help. They could use some interior offensive line play.
Who's the best receiver on the board right now?
Nick, you can sort by position if you go back up. They've got Josh
Touchdowns.
Downs out of
So I would
North
say
Carolina.
this would be this is way too, but I think Tippmann here, the center guard from where's he from? Tippmann. Can we look him up real quick? Tippmann, God bless it. From Wisconsin? Yeah.
Yeah.
He is.
It's all the Big Ten guys. I was like, Whippler, no, he's Ohio State.
Yeah. So
Joe
Tippmann to me is better than Schultz from Minnesota. Like he's the best.
Schmitz, yeah.
Schmitz. He's the best probably swing guy inside, and if you're looking for a center that's going to be excellent in terms of what they do, I think this is a better fit. Like I'm a little bit down on Schmitz the more I watch him. I think he's a good football player, but I think he's more of a second round player. I think Joe Tippmann, because of the position flexibility, is probably where I would go if I'm looking for an interior offensive lineman with the ability to play center. Like obviously Osiris Torrance is my best guard, but he can only play guard. So it's kind of like this feels like the right direction here now. And, I feel bad not mentioning Osiris Torrance earlier. It's funny how drafts go, but there's got to be the right fit, you know what I mean? And players start to fall. And so I would go here. I would go Tippmann here for New York.
All right, let's do it. And then the Cowboys.
It's like the stars aligned for this, didn't it?
Yeah, Bijan Robinson. Like they lose Zeke. They get the best back in the draft. He's from Texas. I mean, you could go Breesy here and get some interior help on that D line, but like, I would just go Bijan and.
Yeah, I mean,
you're welcome, Dak.
Feels like such a Dallas pick. I'm a little surprised, honestly, that we still have Broderick Jones and Anton Harrison on the board. Like, I wouldn't take them here, but
I think that's also due to the fact, though, that like we haven't had the trades down, right?
That's true.
If you are at 23 with Minnesota, you trade up to 16 with Washington to take whoever.
Yeah.
Then Washington's taking a tackle at 23.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point.
I think that's like this draft is going to look silly once and maybe we'll do another one, or when we do our next one, we'll unlock the trades and I think that.
Like I think So Bijan Robinson for sure here.
Okay, let's go Bijan, and then let's wrap up these last 5 picks. Buffalo, they need a defensive back.
This is where I think they could reach for a guy like Emmanuel Forbes. Like I think
that's
Emmanuel
exactly
Forbes,
what I was going to say.
He's a heck of a football player. Like there's no safeties or anything available. They don't really have a ton of needs. Maybe offensive tackle, and again, the 2 guys remaining are left tackles, right? Broderick Jones and Anton Harrison. They have a pretty good left tackle, so they could definitely go like Broderick Jones here to play right. I think Anton Harrison's a pure left, but he can play right, so they could easily go that direction here. But I think if I had to put money on it, I would say that they'd probably go like a DB, Emmanuel Forbes.
All right, let's go Emmanuel Forbes. Done. Bengals.
Tight end.
Yeah, they could use a tight end. Let's go Mayer here. Tight end
or Brian Breesy, depending on their evaluation. But tight end, they've got an awesome young quarterback there. What's his name again? Joe.
Yeah. Joe, I'm about to get paid a lot of money. Burrow,
yeah. So you want to get weapons around him. He'd be cheap. I think he's a good football player, and he doesn't have to win in the man-to-man situations because of all the playmakers they have there. So I think Meyer is the fit here.
All right. So let's go Meyer, and then you have New Orleans at 29, a team that is primed to trade up potentially if that's on the table in your particular draft. Of course, it is in the real one, which is the only one that matters. They could go literally anywhere.
So I'm in conflict right now because I really want Osiris Torrance to play in Philadelphia because I just think that's like a perfect fit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I also think he'd be a good fit here in New Orleans. This is one of the ones where I think, like, based on the types of players that they like, you could get a weird pick here. Like Kenyon White, from Georgia Tech, is like this huge, massive defensive end, 6'5", 290 pounds. And they just lost Davenport. He's a little bit lower on my board, but like in terms of fit and style and like a perfect replacement for your guy Cam Jordan, like this is where something weird like that can happen. Or the edge from Northwestern, like a bigger body edge player who's maybe not as high as some of these other guys, but
Nick,
because
can you pull up the edge list for us?
But because of the fit, it's like they would just be like, oh yeah, it'd be perfect. You know what I mean? So
let's see how far down those guys are on this list before we do something totally crazy.
So Yeah, so like I would put him above this Tuli Tuilopu guy. I think he's down one more. Scroll down a little bit more. Andre Carter, no, no, no.
Yeah.
Where is he on this list? This is insanity.
Maybe Keon White
He's
is all the way down at
90.
90.
Get out of here, PFF. What are you doing? If he's available at 90, Washington, you should be super excited because you're picking him in the third round.
Average draft position 74 in the mock
I don't think
drafts.
he's going to go that low. I think he'll be like he feels to me like a low second, high third round guy, which is way higher than 90. 74 feels a little bit better.
But too rich to take in the first round.
I will also say this. Like they traded up for Davenport.
Oh yeah.
And they do weird stuff.
They do. I remember talking to an NFC scout who's a really great dude that I respect a lot, and he hated Davenport. He had like a 7th round grade on him.
Right, but I'm saying like they're going to do what they're going to do. Scroll up a little bit, Nick. Sorry, bud. So if of the guys that are, Carl Brooks is so good. Yeah, I mean, I think all these dudes.
What about Ojulari?
Dude,
LSU kid.
Baller. He's a baller. I mean, Felix is a baller. Will McDonald's
a baller.
Does
Does he fit what they do?
But they like bigger edge guys. So if you want a bigger edge guy, it's Edebarwe or, according to this list, Tuilopu. You know what I mean? And that just feels a little steep to me. So, or
do they just go Osiris Torrance?
Or do you go Brian Breesy here?
I think that's also possible. I mean, we might be overthinking it. At this point, is Breesy clearly the best player on the board?
See, I'm down on Breesy, so you're asking the wrong guy.
Right.
I would go any of those guys I just mentioned probably over him because I like their film.
Let's go Edebarwe then. That's the guy that seems to be kind of in the sweet spot of everything. Positional need, what you want. Let's go Edebarwe for the Saints at 29. And then that puts Osiris Torrance at Philly, which what do we give them at 10 as well?
We gave them Cansey, so they're balling. They had an excellent
Philly's
draft.
just killing it again. Son of a gun. You're so welcome, Eagles fans. And then for the Chiefs at 31, the final pick of this monstrosity of a podcast, first round, hour-long mock draft that we've done.
They lost the left tackle, right? And they just signed a guy.
They did just sign someone. But they also lost their right tackle. And Andrew Wiley, because he came here. So
that's a good point.
Broderick Jones.
Gosh, I like Anton Harrison more, but he's okay. I like but he's a left tackle. So, like, does he fit there? If not, I mean,
they've done that before. They took who's the kid they took? Like 2 overall, and he was the right tackle for a decade.
Oh yeah, what's his name? Oh shoot, yeah, Fisher. Is that right?
Yeah, Eric Fisher. So,
or I go Will McDonald here because Will McDonald's sick, filthy, nasty, and when you're up by 15 points a game, like having good pass rush is awesome.
All right, let's go McDonald to wrap out the first round.
Yeah, dude, if that happens, Washington's jumping for joy because you're probably getting a tackle at 48. You know.
Yeah. So let me
just analysis real quick.
Yeah.
I don't think Anton Harrison and I don't think Broderick Jones are going to be second round players, right? But based on how we went here, like I actually feel really good about our first. I know people are going to freak out. Please leave a comment. Let us know how you feel. But I feel really good about the players we selected and the thought process we picked. But this is what's so fun about the draft is that this might happen. And if this does happen, you are doing a backflip if you're Washington because you're going to get an outstanding football player at 48.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, that's the thing is like this draft is deep where they need it to be deep. Because if let's say all of a sudden there's a run in the late 30s on tackles and all of a sudden 48 looks a lot more sad at tackle, that means all the other corners are still out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you still have, the Matthew Bergerons and you still have, well, I guess if there's a run on tackles, he might go, but like you have all the interior guys outside of Osiris Torrance. You have all, you have Whippler, you have all these, the centers, guards, etc. So this draft is deep where Washington needs it. I do think they're going to be in a real funky spot at 16. Like that just feels like they're going to want to trade down. I don't see many mock drafts where my initial instinct isn't to trade down. That was certainly today. The question is who's going to want to trade up and for what? Because I don't know how much differentiation there's going to be on boards. Because it's one thing, like if you want to trade down, you need someone else to be there to trade up for. Like it just has to be a situation where the best player on the board doesn't fit your needs and it's worth it to you to trade down. If it's because, well, we just got to the next bucket for everyone, then no one's going to want to trade up with you. So that is kind of a weird spot where I think they could get caught.
I didn't think in this draft, I didn't think like Will Levis would go to 19. I didn't think so. but it just like that's how it happens. And if he does slide, a trade up with Tampa would be perfect. Get back to 19, get another.
But if you're Tampa
pick.
and you don't think that the other teams in front of you are going
right.
to take a quarterback, then like why would you trade up?
Absolutely. No,
So-
I think it's a great point. And it's just a really doing our first mock draft together. This was really interesting, I think, because it shows you just like, you never know, like all of the evaluations be damned. Like it could just fall right for you. And you just, you know what I mean? Like who would have thought Emmanuel Forbes would bump into the first round? And like that, like, even though looking at it, I'd never seen anyone mock him to Buffalo. It feels like the right pick. You know what I'm saying? It feels like the right pick for them. So it was a really interesting, exercise, I think, in terms of going through this.
I think we'll do at least one more, if not 2 or 3 more of these leading up to the draft here. I mean, we're already in April. We only have so many weeks left. We will talk about the best players overall. How did they put together the big board at PFF? The lead guy in charge of it, Mike Renner, joins us later this week. Let us know what you think of the mock. Leave a comment. Of course, you can also watch this whole thing back on 106.7 The Fans page. We'll put some clips up at Craig Hoffman and Logan. Very exciting news. The Team 980 now has a YouTube page. You can subscribe, youtube.com/@theteam980. And I will be live streaming our radio show there every day now. So
Awesome.
That's really exciting. I've been working on that for a long time. It's happening hilariously. It's just going to start. I don't even know if this podcast will be out when or by the time that this is relevant, but like starting today, Monday, as we record this, we're going to live stream every day. And then I'm off the rest of the week because I was supposed to be on vacation and my vacation got canceled, but my PTO didn't. So I'll just be sitting at home waiting to do the podcast with Logan on Wednesday and Mike on Wednesday. That's my week. But next week, 4 to 7 each and every day, we'll be live streaming on youtube.com/@theteam980. So make sure you check that out. And of course, we're all still the same places on the radio and on the always free Odyssey app. All right, for Logan, I'm Craig. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you think, and we'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 106.7 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do
He's
it.
Very, very smart.